Hi everyone, it's Mark here again. I'm the founder of the Arts and Culture Network. We're a growing global community of 185,000 now across our 8 arts and culture LinkedIn groups. I don't get to meet everybody, as you can imagine, but when I do, it's a pleasure. And Susan Fraser-Hughes has joined me today for an interview. So if you're watching this, you'll probably find links to Susan's work wherever this appears. Susan is one of our full members. We're we're member funded entirely as a community, so it's very much appreciated. Susan, thank you so much for joining me to do this today.
Oh, thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to see what you have in store for me.
I know we're going to have some fun. Um, I'm going to create your fantasy cultural year based on the work you do. Um, and I'll be asking you some easy questions to which there are no wrong answers. And we found it's a lovely way to get to know you a little bit better. So, but before we do, perhaps you'd be kind enough to say hi to everyone. Tell us where you're based and the kind of work that you've been doing. And while you're doing that, I'll pull up your website so that we can see the work, if that's okay. Some of which is behind you. And this is that I love this 30 days thing. 31 days, was it? I can't remember when we
Uh,
talked.
30 on this one. Yeah.
30 on this one.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm keen that you should tell everyone about the thinking behind that because, as you know, when we last spoke, I love it when an artist has a picture hook, something that I will never forget about the work. And for me, that's it. That discipline of doing that. So I'm really keen to learn more about that. So over to you,
All
Susan.
right. Well, hi, everyone. My name is Susan Fraser-Hughes, and I am an artist based in Vancouver, Canada. I've lived here for about 11 years, and my work is predominantly drawing. I work with charcoal on a surface called frosted mylar, which is like a drafting material that has a slight tooth that allows charcoal to stick and also be released. And I tell stories through my work. I tell my stories and other people's stories and the stories of objects and the stories of places. And I just try and find connections between myself and others and all of those other things.
And do tell me more about the project with the 30 pictures, one a day, I believe it was. Um,
Yeah, I only do this series every so often. It's sort of exhausting, but it gives a little bit of an insight into how my mind works or how it doesn't work. And this one was done last November, and it is a series of drawings that were done every day of November. So my process is I enter the woods and I walk. And before I start walking, I'll just put out a small ask that I see something that day that will resonate with me. And I walk until it does. And I know as soon as it does, it just sort of hits me. And I'll take a million photographs and then I go back to the studio and then immediately I will start to draw. Any photographs I take are just a reference only. They're a trigger point for me to remember what did I smell? What did I see? What did I hear? What did I feel? And that's what I try and embody in each of the pieces. So I have to do a piece on a day. I have to post it on LinkedIn on a day. I have to respond to the comments I receive on LinkedIn. So it then becomes a conversation between the woods, myself, and the people on LinkedIn.
Fantastic. It's such an imaginative idea. I love it. Um, right, I'm going to share my screen so that those watching can see some of the other work, and we can show people where they should go for. There we go. That's the one. Can you see that? I think you should.
Mhm.
There we go.
Yep.
So perhaps you could give us a quick guided tour. Tell me where to go and what to look for. These all look great. And as you and I spoke when we last met, I love the fact that it's more than photography. You're taking, as you said, you're using those photographs as just aide memoire, really, about the place that you were at, and the event, the resulting work is more than the photograph could do, which is fantastic. What are we looking at here, or is there somewhere else I should go into
No,
selected
you can go
works?
there. I'm represented by a gallery called Vedika Art Studios and Gallery, and they are based in Mumbai. So these images are taken from two exhibitions I've participated in. This one was last year, and these drawings are actually from the last time I did a month-long walk in the woods, and about 2 years ago. And then if you scroll down, this was also an exhibition in Mumbai last year. This one is called A Just Moment. So this is where I'm exploring a little bit of myself. I have some dress forms. They're sort of heads that used to be used for hat making. And I did a series where I drew it and then I turned it, and then I drew it and I turned it. And there are 16 heads in this series. And
Mm.
it was exploring me and just how sometimes, not so much now, but I used to just have to pause before I would walk into a room. And it was almost like I had to compose myself just a moment until so that's what that series was.
It's fantastic. And there are the 30. Are these the ones that are behind you?
No, this was the last time I did the series. These were in
Ah,
an
okay.
exhibition last year, and they were very kind in putting all of them up.
Mm.
And it was just a lovely conversation between the pieces themselves, but also the other pieces that were in there, some beautiful landscape art.
Fantastic. Well, this is at susanfraserhughes.com if anyone watching would like to explore more. So that's wonderful. Thank you for that guided tour. That's great. Now you've given me inspiration for your fantasy cultural year. Okay. Based on the work. I'm afraid it's going to have to be based on the 30 days because I've got an idea. Um, in order to start this, I need to place you somewhere in the world. Okay. And I'm
Yeah.
going to do that by asking you, what's your favorite building?
Oh, good grief. I like old buildings. I like the ruins of old buildings that really speak with me to me. And there is a place in St. David's in Wales that it used to be the monastery there. I think it's a monastery. But there is something about that building that just speaks to my soul.
I'm going to see if I've found the right building. Have a look. Is this the right one?
That is correct. It's right near that though. This is the actual abbey, but there is a route, yeah, down to um,
Oh, here on the right.
I think so, yes. Yes. Yeah, that is
Wow.
it.
Look at
Hmm.
that. Wonderful. Okay. So I'm going to whisk you to St. David's Cathedral in Wales, and I'd like you to imagine that you're sitting here at a pop-up cafe, okay,
Hmm.
enjoying the view of both the ruin and the cathedral.
Hmm.
And it's sunny. It's 6 p.m. on a June evening, and there is a drink on the table next to you. What would we find there?
Is it my drink?
Your drink. Yes, your drink.
What would I have? I think I'd have a sparkling water.
Okay. So we've got the ruins of St. David's Cathedral in Wales, some sparkling water. There's a book on the table next to you. It's either a book that's been with you all your life, a favorite book, or a recent discovery. What would we find there?
Hmm. There is a really interesting book that I've just been revisiting called The Alchemist. I'll go with The Alchemist.
Wonderful. Is that Pablo? Who is it? I can't remember. Somebody.
Coelho.
That's
Co
it. Coelho. Coelho. Got it.
Mm.
Wonderful. Now you've got headphones on and some music is playing. What music would be playing?
I'm going to go with Gregorian chants.
Oh, that's lovely with that ruin. That's
Yes.
fantastic. And you're sitting at that table, and somebody famous who you admire immensely is walking towards you, and you can't bear the thought of not saying hello. Who is it?
Can he be dead?
Yes,
Oh, Caravaggio, because his work has really inspired my work and the way I look at things.
wonderful. There we go. That's the snapshot we've got. That's the overture. Okay, because we've got the ruin of St. David's Cathedral in Wales, we've got some sparkling water, we've got The Alchemist, we've got Gregorian chant, and we've got um, Caravaggio. Wonderful, love it. Nobody else chooses the same combination, so it's always great. Now, moving on, you're feeling quite pleased with yourself because you've just come from a meeting at the Millennium Centre, I think in Cardiff, in Wales, let's suggest. Um, and you've had a meeting with a wealthy Welsh family foundation who like to support arts projects. And they've got wind of your 30-day thing. And that's there because it's your picture hook. They are part of an international community and they would like to hire you for a year at great expense to them to travel the world and create your 30-day work every other month, not every month, because that would be exhausting, in different parts of the world. Okay.
Mhm.
Famous forests, for example. So all you have to do is oh, and there are other things, other benefits as well. So your friends and family can come and visit you during the year. There'll be a TV crew following you. There'll be a TED talk when you get back, and you'll become a bit of you'll be on the morning TV circuit, and there's a book deal, and you get to do a university lecture tour once you've completed the work. Does that sound like fun?
How do I sign up?
So you work for a month in a certain country or forest or area, then a month off. Then you work for a month, and you're going to do that for a year, so that they've got a book with your 30-day pieces from 6 different famous forests around the world.
Sounds great.
Doesn't it?
I,
Where can I? Yes, sign me up. So, all you have to do, oh, and I should point out, I have a magic wand and a time machine at my disposal for these options of what you do. We can go back in time, and I have a magic wand. So, um, I guess the first thing you need to do is to decide where you're going to start because it's entirely up to you.
hmm. I think I might go with the olive orchards in Italy.
Ooh, yes, Tuscany, somewhere like
Mm.
that.
Mm.
Yes, lovely. I love that. So, you're on the plane, okay? You turned left when you got on the plane because you're traveling first class. The steward brings you some sparkling water and a note from the Family Foundation back in Wales. They have a musical challenge for you on this trip. They would like you to limit your musical listening to one very specific genre of music. And if you had to do that to the exclusion of all else, what would you choose?
Mm. Classical?
Good choice. Who might appear on your playlist?
Hmm. Well, Mozart for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Chopin?
Mm. And one more.
One more. Um, yeah, I don't know. I could say Beethoven, but I'm thinking of someone else, but let's just go with Beethoven for now.
Okay, that would keep you going. Mozart,
Mhm.
Beethoven, and Chopin.
Mm.
Fantastic. Excellent. Now you arrive in, sorry, where did we say we were going? Um, what was our first destination?
Oh, we're going to the olive orchards in
Of
Tuscany.
course, yes, Tuscany. So Florence would be a nice place to start there,
Sure.
and then
Hmm.
Siena, and then beyond that. Now you arrive in Florence, and a group of young artists welcome you. They whisk you into the center of the city, and you've got a wonderful loft apartment overlooking the Duomo in Florence. And the young people say, we're going to come back and take you to a dance performance and then out to dinner before you start the work. Now, this is where the time machine and the magic wand comes in, because I can put on the stage in front of you any dance-based performance you like, historical or current and contemporary. You can have any dance style, any dance group, or any dancers, living or not. So in those circumstances, what dance performance can I put on the stage for you?
I have to be honest, I haven't watched a lot of dance, so I don't know that I could answer this. I'm going
It
to say
doesn't have to be, it doesn't,
local. I'll go with whatever local is, whatever represents the local culture. That's what I would want to see.
okay, that sounds like a good idea then. So we'll have a wonderful display of Italian folk dancing.
Sure.
Um, Now, dinner. You don't have to stay in Italian culture. What would be your national cuisine of choice for dinner?
If I was in Italy, I'd be having the Italian cuisine.
Okay, sounds like that's a good move. Now we're going to buzz again from Florence to somewhere else in the world, another forest or
Mhm.
another area of that you would be attracted to. Where would we go?
I know that there is an ancient forest in France, and I'm not sure exactly where it is, but I've seen images, paintings of it. That's where I would like to go.
Okay, let's see if Google knows. Um, Fontainebleau, Berchet, and Pampon and Broceliande. It'll be one of those, I'm sure. You can explore 5 of France's oldest forests. There we go.
Mm.
It'll be one of those, I think. Let's
Mhm.
go to Fontainebleau because I like the name and I can pronounce it. Um, so we're in Fontainebleau. I'm not sure where the nearest city is, but wherever that is, it's sport day in France. Okay. Now, I don't know if you're a sports fan or not, but we've had breakdancing in the Olympics. We have ice dancing in the Winter Olympics. Some sport could be considered performance art. So it's entirely up to you. I can put any sporting event in front of you for a couple of hours. What would you like to watch?
Well, my son is a rower, so I would like to watch the rowing on the water there.
It just so happens in our fantasy cultural year that the World Rowing Championships are in Fontainebleau near the forest, and your son is taking part. So
Hmm.
we'll go and do that. Love that. Now let's buzz again. Where are we going next?
I have seen again, I've only seen images of this, but I've seen images of somewhere in England where there are these incredible roadways and pathways that seem to go through forests where the sides of the banks above the pathways are incredibly high. I know there's a name for it, but it's like these sunken pathways with these incredible banks rising up and then the trees above that. there.
Yeah, I used to live in Surrey in England, and there is exactly that there, in the Surrey Hills, where the
Mm,
roadway is about 12 feet beneath the surface
yeah,
of the, yeah. And
yeah,
it's a bit sort of Wookiee hole sort of, yeah, I love that. And the trees create the roof of what looks
yeah.
like a building as you're going through. Great idea. So well, I'll whisk you to Surrey because I know there are some there. Um, and let's assume that and when and in Surrey we'll go to Guildford, which was my place of birth. Once voted the most boring city in England, unfortunately, but not because I was born there, I hasten to add. Um, but let's assume in our fantasy cultural year that there's a new digitally enhanced art gallery, okay? And you can put on a virtual reality headset and step into the work of a famous artist. It becomes three-dimensional. It's 360 degrees. You can walk around inside the painting. There is animation and there might be sound. I think I might know where this is going, but which famous artist's work would you like to step into and explore in 3 dimensions what they could only show us in two?
Turner, without a doubt.
Oh, yes. J.M. Turner walking along the banks of those misty sort of
Mm.
scenes. Yeah, that's a let's show everybody something so that I'm sure most will be familiar. Um, yes, look at these. Share my screen again. Where's it gone? There. These are wonderful, aren't they?
Mm. Hmm.
Look at that. Yeah.
I read somewhere once that he tied himself, I'm not sure if this is even true, but he tied himself to the mast of the boats so he could feel the power of the storms as the boat
Mm,
was moving through. So, yeah,
mm,
I would love to experience one of his pieces.
yeah. I mean, this is obviously the an old galleon being dragged
Mm.
to its resting place, but yeah, wonderful. Okay, you'll be walking along the path here, looking at that
Mhm.
scene towards the setting sun. Love that. Now I'm going to whisk you back to London, and you and I are going out every night of the week to do something cultural. Okay. On Monday, we're going back in time to a rock or pop concert. On Tuesday, we're going to a Shakespeare play at the Globe Theatre. On Wednesday, we're going to a West End musical or Broadway musical. On Thursday, we're going to the opera or the ballet. And on Friday, we're going to the movies. And between us, we can decide what we see. But don't forget, I've got the time machine and the magic wand. So for Monday, is there a concert that you attended that you'd love to go back to and experience again? Or is there one that you've never been to, would love to, and now can't? Mine was Bob Marley. I could have done, I didn't, I regret it. Um, is there a historical concert that you'd like to go? It could be one you attended and would like to do again, or it could be one that you missed.
Um, I think Adele. I would have liked to have seen Adele when she was performing.
Mm, I'm sure she will again, but
I hope
yes,
so.
at
Yeah, I
her
hope so.
peak. Yeah, at her
Mm,
peak. That's a great
mm.
choice. And you get to pick a Shakespeare play.
Oh dear. I'm not good with Shakespeare. I'm sorry. My son's just been reciting a Shakespeare play to me, and uh, I'm going to have to pass because I'd have to do some research and just work out what I would like to see.
Okay. I'm I love Shakespeare, but my wife, it's an intangible thing for her. She just doesn't get it. And I fully understand that. Have you seen the new movie Hamnet yet?
Oh, no.
Oh, it's great. It really is good. based on Shakespeare and his wife. It's tipped for awards. I think one of our members, Colin David Rees, is a Shakespeare expert, and he always suggests that Measure for Measure is the play that is the best one to start with. So I
Okay.
think we'll go for that, Measure for Measure. What
Good.
about a West End or a Broadway musical for Wednesday?
I haven't seen Phantom of the Opera. I would like to see it. It's always been at the back of my mind. So that
Yes,
one. Mhm.
that would be great. We can do that. As you probably know, the chandelier drops during the show.
I did.
At the end. Oh, I've spoiled it for everyone now. I'll have to put spoiler alert on this. Are you an opera fan, Susan?
I like it. I don't know a lot about it, but yes, I do like to listen to it.
And ballet? Do you enjoy ballet?
Again, I like it, and I don't know much, but yes, I have been to some performances. Yeah.
Which would you prefer, opera or ballet, for me to take you to?
Hmm. Um, hmm.
Mhm.
Either or. I think either or. I'm open to anything, really. So surprise me.
Then I think we're in London, so we'll go to the Royal Opera House and we'll watch Tosca by Puccini, which I
Okay.
often advise people is a beautiful entry point into opera. The music is just incredible. The story is understandable. It's got tragedy. It's wonderful, and opera is often described as the grand format because you've got singing, acting, beautiful scenery, music. It's where all of the art forms come together. It's sometimes, and so yes, Puccini's Tosca it is. Now, film night. We've got a big screen, best seats in the house, surround sound. What movie are we watching?
I just watched it recently, and I think on a big screen it would be amazing. It's the movie Edie, Edie.
Oh, okay. EDIE. I don't know that. I'm going to have to watch that.
It
Uh,
is a beautiful movie.
Excellent. That's a great one. Now we're nearly there, and I'm going to send you off to do this wonderful year, and you'll get to do all of those wonderful things having completed it. But before I do, I'm giving you a hero lunch. Um, this is a little bit like the person you admire walking towards you, but you get to choose someone to have a 2-hour lunch with to pick their brains, historical or current. Who would you choose other than
Okay.
Caravaggio? Mhm.
Oh, there's so many people. Like if I could go back in time, like Plato, I'd love to sit with Plato and just listen to what he has to say and participate in the discussion. So there, that's my
That's a
choice.
that's a great choice. No one's chosen Plato before. I love that. Well, there you are. That's your fantasy cultural year. Have you enjoyed your fantasy cultural year?
Thank you. I feel like I've been around the world and I'm back again. That's a good one.
Wonderful. Susan, thank you so much again for being one of our full members and for joining me and being such a good sport with this. Wherever this appears, there'll be links to you and the work you're doing so that people can get in touch and see more of the work. Please don't rush off, but for the time being, thanks again for joining me to do this today.
Oh, thank you so much. It was fun.